Dr. Mark Jangizi here, the Science Moment. Today I'm going to walk through something that I had found that I had written as I was approaching 50. I think I was about to turn 49. And I had looked back how I'd changed intellectually in other ways from when I was young, sort of 20s and teens and whatever, to approaching 50. And looking back at sort of the young me versus the older me and trying to think of how I'd changed. And I think as I'd kind of noticed that I had become a bit of an anti-intellectual, and I consider that a kind of an intellectual development of its own, but I think it was anti-intellectual in the sense of what I took intellectual to mean when I was young, which is sort of overly IQ-related kinds of, raw intelligence stuff, to be more enjoying life and socio-emotional intelligence, the topic of Tim Barker, my most recent book, and appreciating that some of the deepest things in life are in fact not what I thought was deep when I was young. And I thought it would be useful and interesting potentially for some of you for me to walk through some of these. I'm going to try to keep my commentary short because there's about 20 of these little young me and older me, and I can talk about these. I'll probably talk about some of these in more detail, and I have probably talked about some of these in detail over the last 350 or so science moments. But I thought it'd be fun to walk through some of these and see how you felt, for those maybe that are similar age or even young, whether you agree with the young version of me then, and maybe you'll wonder whether you'll change in the same way, or maybe you change in a different way. I'd be curious to see what happened to you in the comments. So again, this is 2018. There's a Twitter thread that I'd done on it, and it's also all in a Substack over at my Substack. One, young me. The point to life is to answer the questions to the universe. Older me, well, that, and to live the hell out of my human body. Right? That's one big difference that I'd say. Number two, young me, physics is deepest. It's the deepest study that there is because physics, it's physics. And even slightly older me, it didn't take that long, was that I started to realize that theoretical biology is even deeper because many of the same high-level principles that we discover in theoretical biology would apply even with different physics. Right? And this is actually true for a lot of the psychosocial issues that we're talking about. The same kinds of effects would occur because often they're emergent phenomena which would find themselves still occurring in other universes with different laws of physics. Physicists here may not know anything about those. I mean, statistical physics people probably would because it's a lot of soul emergent dynamic stuff. But a lot of the other kinds of physics wouldn't even apply there, but a lot of the psychosocial stuff would. So I've come to think that physics isn't the deepest at all. Young me, number three. Young me, math is even deeper than physics. Older me, nah. Math is just tracking down twisted tautologies. It's just like a game. It's like a complex game, but it's not particularly deep at all. They're just tautologies, things that have no choice but to be true, and our minds sometimes have trouble wrapping our minds around them, but that doesn't make them per se deep. Number four, young me, biology reduces to physics. Older me, nah, physics is about dead goop. Biology is about the vanishingly small goops that are selected to do stuff. Right? That's deeply different. And it's something I talk about in an earlier Gizmodo article about how Gödel saved me from physics. And I'll put a little sort of link up here. You can go search for it at Gizmodo. And I really changed over time how I thought about really the big things in the universe, and that it wasn't physics at all. It's about biology, because within biology you find not just interesting physics, but the physics stuff, the goopy stuff that was selected for amongst trillions and trillions of stuff that was uninteresting. You ended up with these self-organized systems that were deeply designed to do stuff. It's much more interesting. Number five, young me. I can't wait to be like Bertrand Russell and von Neumann, Carnap, Turing, Quine, and Putnam. These are great philosophers, mathematicians, scientists, logician types that I always wanted to be like them. And they were good at multiple fields. They were good across the board. Older me, where the hell did those types go? There's just so few of those types of philosopher, logician, scientists left. Number six, young me. Sex is cool and all, but, life, the universe, and everything. Of course, I like sex. I'm a guy. I enjoy it. But it wasn't. I thought, well, that's not truly what's important in life. Is not any of that stuff. These bodily, desires and things like this. What's important is life, universe, and everything. And older me is like, well, sex is like everything. And I don't mean that actual intercourse, but I mean the fact that there are socio-sexual signals between all of us is kind of what makes life fun, right? These things are constantly occurring. They're all wrapped up in the kinds of clothes that we wear, the kind of clothes that we wear, the way that we act, the kinds of places that we want to go. All of these kinds of socio-sexual signals are constantly occurring, and it's really what makes life have an edge to it, right? And appreciating those things. And it's not just base stuff. No, it's really what makes, in art and music, all of these things are often dripping in socio-sexual signals. It doesn't just mean straight on sex. I just mean all of these things are dripping in lots of the stuff around us and have selected to tap into those things. Number 7, young me, being on TV looks fun. Older me, being on TV is totally not fun. So I had some time on brain games on National Geographic, and then I was sort of the regular TV host for Head Games on Discovery Channel, and it's not a lot of fun at all. It's actually super boring. Number 8, young me. People can be deeply irrational and biased in their arguments, but we intellectuals can rise above that. Older me, nah, not usually. And we saw this with COVID, where perhaps the most intellectual, academically trained people were amongst the least rational, most group-thinky, most panicked, most civil liberties violating. People often can't seem to overcome it unless you're thinking about it constantly, potentially. Number 9, young me. To stay healthy, I'll just eat as much bread as possible. People that are younger may not realize, bread was like just totally healthy for you. You really wanted to avoid the butter, but you would have the bread. Older me, to stay healthy, I'll just eat as little bread as possible. This is just sort of a fun aside in terms of how things have changed. Number 10, young me, looking for political fights at parties. I used to love that. I just enjoy the debate process. I used to. I'm saying. Of course, now I'm thrust in it for the last 3 years with COVID hysteria and authoritarianism and so forth. Older me, I mostly don't give a crap other than defending freedom of speech, and I would say just freedom generally, which is why we started FreeX and so forth. Other than that, I'm not really interested in getting into all of the woke debates and getting into left-right discussions constantly. I did all that when I was young. You've done it, you don't have to do it again and again. Your whole life, the same arguments over and over and over again. Number 11, young me, I want a wife who is a mathematician. And generally sort of a deep intellectual in terms of the very physics, mathy kind of sense. Older me, I want a wife who is an artist. Right? And my current wife is an artist, an athlete, something that's more, a very different kind of thinking ultimately. I think that's a more socio-emotionally connected intelligence that is the intelligence that actually matters in real life. Number 12, young me, logic is our most sophisticated human ability. Emotions are low and stupid. I'm sure that was a physics math, undergrad kid. It's Carl Sagan, Cosmos kid. It's the kind. Not that he was narrow-minded or anything, but that's more the style of the typical physics kid. Older me, we're useless at logic. We really are. Our most brilliantly designed cognitive system is the emotional one, the emotions. And this again comes back to Dr. Tim Barber and my book. New book, Express the Human, Decoding the Language of Emotions. It really is the language that we speak. And I guess when I wrote this in 2018, we hadn't started writing, but we've been working on it for a decade. So we were still in the middle of trying to make it all fit. At the time, it was just lots of puzzle pieces trying to fit it all together. This grand unifying theory of emotional expressions. Number 13, young me. Science has much to teach the arts. Right? We scientists, especially the young, ones filled with hubris, think that, we'll just figure out how to make really good art so that we can make even better art. Older me, nah. Science can learn much more from the arts than the other way around. And I think I've had an older science moment on this pre-COVID. But art is playing in a different arena than science. Scientists have to do experiments with a couple free parameters, maybe, if they're lucky, in order to control something very carefully to get at some very simple question. Artists, the community of artists, can play with massive numbers of parameters that they're just sort of intuiting and finding their way to these sweet spots in these big multidimensional spaces that scientists could never find, much less justify scientifically. Artists are the ones that have created the selection pressures across the community of artists and the minds and brains observing their art are what has created the greatest discoveries in some sense that culture has ever given us, which is including even writing. Writing is in some sense an artistic creation. Over time, the communities create new kinds of stimuli that better fit the brain. Same for the sounds of speech. This is why we can have speech and process speech, because speech sounds like solid object events. Letters look like the contour conglomerations in nature. The sounds of music sound like humans moving evocatively in your midst. And these selection processes are exactly like the selection processes that happen across artists, right? We're all, in a sense, artists selecting for stuff over time, and we discover incredibly, brilliantly designed things that science is too dumb to discover. All right, number 14. Young me writes up a paper publication so elegantly that even I cannot understand it. 'Cause elegance is beauty or something. I had this idea that it should be written so compressed and elegant that there's no wasted words, but it ends up to be completely unreadable. I'll put up on the screen some of the pages from one of these math papers that I wrote, as a young graduate student. This was trying to understand formalizing and making rigorous the notion of what it would be to have a eureka moment. Why creatures, even if you're the size of the universe, a computational device, no matter how smart you are, there are certain kinds of problems that are computable. You can solve them, but you will be surprised when you come to a conclusion. You'll have a eureka moment. You're like, oh, I just suddenly solved it. And I didn't know I was even getting close. And you can actually prove results about this. But there's no way, barely any way to know that that's what it's about from the paper itself, because I was really being romantic by making it uninterpretable. Older me, though, writes in a super breezy, redundant prose so that anyone can understand. Young me, number 15. Young me, wish I could get a little respect. We're all young, we're trying to do something that makes a mark. Older me, splashes of gray hair, and now I've got more than splashes. Splashes of gray hair induces the average young man to say, sir, and I want to punch them in the face for the implication. It's like, I walk up, just think I'm just like them, they're just gonna treat me like a dude. But they say, sir, and I'm like, oh man, I look old. Number 16, young me, I'll get a couple dogs as training for kids. Older me, well, dogs were actually more difficult than kids. And there's truth to that if you've had both. Number 17, young me, it's so cool that we humans are the uniquely plastic animal. All these other animals, piles of instincts, but we're like, we can be shaped to do anything. We're blank slates. Older me, we're just as much piles of instincts as all the other animals. Steven Pinker is one of the best folks that has written about this, that makes really convincing arguments in this way. My own stuff, is along those lines too. But he's the one in Blank Slate that really I think combines and makes a life-changing way of thinking about it. Number 18, young me, huge difference between male and female sexual receptivity at a bar. Right? That within evolution sort of, and psychology, the idea is, well, men have cheap sperm, women have precious few eggs, so men are going to be much more just ready to go, whereas women are much. But so I just figured, if I ended up at a bar, this is going to be a lot of work for the guy. But it turns out that the older me, holy crap, hardly any difference at all. Now, of course, you're selecting for different types of folks who do show up at the bar, but it's turned out much more symmetrical than I could have ever imagined. Number 19, young me, defined by what I plan on doing in my life. Older me, trying desperately not to be defined by what I already did, right? We don't want to be defined by what we already did, because you kind of feel like you don't have a future. What makes you feel like you have a future is that there's all these unknowns. I could become something else someday. There's new stuff. I don't know what. There's unshaped clay that's still part of me to be shaped. That's part of what it is to be alive. Number 20, young me, the far side is freaking hilarious. Older me, it's mildly amusing at most. It's just really not funny. I'm really surprised by that to this day. Same for Cheers, by the way, not funny at all anymore. Number 21, young me, culture is just the suite of silly things we happen to do. Older me, culture brilliantly harnesses us, giving us language and the arts and making us human 2.0s. In my earlier book, Harnessed, as well as Envision Revolution, I talk about the origins of writing, how they tap into or harness us. Harness is all about this, but for language, spoken language, and for music. And a lot of my research is in some sense understanding how it is that cultural evolution is so brilliant and has created all of these artifacts shaped for us and transforming us from human 1.0 sort of primate selves to this new kind of human 2.0 creatures. It's a totally new way to think about what it is that we are. And then in Human 3.0 is my third or fourth book. It's about what's next for us. And it's a novel, half of it's a novel and half of it's nonfiction, discussing sort of where we're going as a species based on these kinds of principles. Human 3.0, you can get it at my website, changizi.com. Number 22, young me laughs at potty jokes. Older me laughs at potty jokes. And finally, number 23, the last one, young me, Persian in name only. My father was from Iran. Older me embraced my Persian side, and so it took really becoming married, I think, to my wife. That now our family, the two of us, are sort of 3/4 Persian, so we end up hanging out with Persian. So I've come to really enjoy being part of that community in a way, and feeling part of an ethnic community that I hadn't ever felt part of before. Those are your 23 young me and older me's that I talked about, again, when I was almost 49 years old, approaching what appeared to be a new stage of life. When you're young, you feel like 50 is really freaking old. And so it felt like I was hitting something very dear at 50. But, here I'm almost 54. It doesn't seem much has happened, I suppose, in the interim. And that was your science moment. If you're interested in the kinds of things I've been talking about for the last 351, etc., episodes of the Science Moment, find me at YouTube or Rumble, and find my Substack at markchangizi.substack.com. Check out the Free Expression Research Institute, freex.group, where we focus on research, trying to understand free expression, how it works in complex social networks, and how it underlies freedom itself.